Hi. So today, this video is going to cover what's called multiple allele genetics. At this point, I'm going to assume you understand simple dominance with just two alleles, a big B and a little b, for instance. And the way that all works, you need to be able to do Punnett squares and pedigrees and all of that kind of stuff. So simple dominance, not bad. Also, later in the video, I'm going to work a little bit with a concept uh, of multiple alleles, but also do it with something where we have some codominance or incomplete dominance. So you should be familiar with codominant and complete dominant genes as well. But what we're going to do now is multiple alleles. I'm going to start with the familiar. I'm going to start with a simple dominant problem. I'm going to draw out some stuff, and then I'm going to show you how multiple alleles is different from the two allele problems that we've been studying. So briefly, let me switch over to my paper here. And let's slide this down a little bit there. Yeah, there we go. So here's the deal. In the problems we've been doing, you might have something like this. Let's say that in rabbits, there's a gene that can make the rabbit's color be brown, what some people call full color rabbits. Okay. And let's say the allele for that, I know this is a little irritating, but I'm going to use the capital C for that. And I'm going to indicate it's a capital with that little line right there. I don't like using the letter C much, but I'm going to be showing you a problem from your worksheet, and it uses the letter C for this. So to indicate a capital, I'm going to put that little line right there. I'm also going to try to draw it bigger than the lowercase c, but that's how I'm going to indicate the allele for brown, which is full color. Now, you're familiar with the concept of brown being dominant to another gene. In this case, let's suppose that there is a kind of rabbit fur called chinchilla. Now, I've seen actual chinchillas, which are a kind of rodent, and they're this beautiful uniform gray color. And I think that's really what chinchilla is. It's probably just uniform gray, but I don't actually know. Now, I'm going to write, because this is going to be a little bit different than your standard simple dominance, I'm going to write this allele, which is recessive to that, as a lowercase c, but then I'm going to put a superscript on it, a CH like this. So this is the way I'm going to write the gene that, if it were the most dominant in the organism, would make that rabbit appear this uniform gray color. Now, if you were doing a GP chart on just these, if it were just two alleles like we've been doing, certainly you could have a rabbit that had only full color genes. It would be a brown or full color gene rabbit. Obviously, it's phenotype because it only has genes for brown. It's going to be brown, full colored. Likewise, you could imagine one that gets a full color gene from one parent and gets the chinchilla gene from the other. And based on what you know before, clearly this would definitely be a full color rabbit. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to skip two lines here for some other alternatives that we're going to run into when we put in multiple alleles. And I'm just going to write down the chinchilla purebred down here. Now, clearly a purebred chinchilla would not be brown. It will only have the chinchilla genes, and so it would be chinchilla in appearance. This is what you expect when you only have two alleles. But let's consider the possibility that there is yet another kind of gene in the rabbit population. I want to point out that no rabbit could have more than two genes in it. One from mom and one from dad, or one from mom and one from dad. The order of which one's maternal and which one's paternal is irrelevant. What I'm saying is that there are more genes available in the rabbit population, even if any individual only has two. They're diploid. They have two parents. They can only get one gene from each parent for that particular trait. But let's suppose that there exists within the rabbit population something called Himalayan. Himalayan. And these are actually, they're white And then they have like brown ear tips, and the nose is brown, and the tips of their paws are brown. And I think their tails are a little brown. They're mostly white with some brown spots in strategic areas. That's called Himalayan. And I'll just put down white with brown like that to kind of indicate what Himalayan is. Honestly, what it looks like isn't that important to us. The point is, it's due to a gene that I'm going to write as a lowercase letter because it is not the most dominant, same as this one, but now my superscript is just going to be an H, and that's going to represent the Himalayan gene. What it means is there might be some rabbits out there who have a big C gene, a full color gene, the most dominant gene from one parent, and a Himalayan gene from their other parent. These will still appear full color, but they're hybrid in a different way than these are hybrid. Similarly, because the chinchilla gene is dominant to the Himalayan gene, you could have a rabbit that got a chinchilla gene as its most dominant allele from one parent and a Himalayan gene from its other parent. It would still appear chinchilla. And actually, for reasons I'll get to later, I'm going to leave one area blank here. You'll notice I filled in one of my blanks up here with the full color hybridized with Himalayan. Filled that one in. In a similar way, I'm going to put a fourth allele here eventually, and it'll fill in that spot. But move on down. With just these three alleles, there is one more genotype possible, and that's a purebred Himalayan. And of course, obviously, to be Himalayan, if it's only got Himalayan genes, it's going to clearly appear as Himalayan. However, to keep going, we're going to add one more gene in the rabbit population. This gene is albino. You may have heard of albinos before. They're all white. They have a lack of pigment. Their body doesn't produce any color genes, or no color genes are active in their body. They're called albino. They're all white. White rabbits are actually albino rabbits. And we're just going to make this is the most recessive gene of the bunch. It's the little c gene. So this makes you albino. It's recessive to this one and this one and this one. This one is dominant to the albino. Himalayan is dominant to albino, but Himalayan is recessive to chinchilla and full color. Chinchilla is dominant to Himalayan and albino, but recessive to full color, and full color is dominant to all of them. In fact, if we go into our handout, this is all described right here. Co-color in rabbits is controlled by multiple alleles. More than two is what we mean by multiple. In this case, there are 4 possible. Full color is dominant to chinchilla, which is dominant to Himalayan, and albino is recessive to them all. That's absolutely consistent with what I've written here so far. The only thing I haven't done is I haven't completed my GP chart. This, by the way, my students, is why I always make out a GP chart. Because once you start doing more complex genetics, you need to keep track of all the possibilities. So now that we've introduced this 4th allele that is recessive to the full color, it means there's a 4th way to be full color. You could have a full color gene as your most dominant gene and an albino gene as your recessive. This would still make you a full colored rabbit. 4 different genotypes all produce the same phenotype, because all you need is one full colored gene to be full colored. Your alternatives as your other gene you got from your other parent are chinchilla, Himalayan, and albino. There are 4 ways to be full colored if you have 4 genes possible, 4 alleles, and the full colored allele is the dominant one. Similarly, we come down here, chinchilla. There are 3 ways to be chinchilla. Purebred chinchilla, chinchilla, what we call carrying a Himalayan gene, and chinchilla carrying an albino gene. All 3 genotypes listed on this side produce the same chinchilla phenotype. Likewise, there are 2 ways to be Himalayan, purebred Himalayan or Himalayan carrying a hybrid Himalayan carrying an albino gene because the albino gene is recessive to this. And then lastly, you could be albino. You could have an albino rabbit. The only way to have an albino rabbit, because albino is the most recessive of all these genes, is to be purebred albino. Now, what this means is that I have a lot more options in the population. I could cross one of these with one of these. I could cross one of these with one of these. I could cross one of these with one of these. I could cross one of these with one of these. Cross this with this and this with this and this with this, and on and on and on. There's a million, well, not a million, but an awful lot of possible crosses when you've got 4 alleles. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different genotypes possible. You've got 100, I believe it is, different crosses possible in a problem like this. So I like multiple alleles because you can write a bunch of different questions about them, and you can as you do your EOS. Let's look at one such question. All of this is the same for any of these rabbit problems I'm going to be doing. They're going to have 4 alleles possible with this set of dominants, and this is the GP chart for them. So let's look at this specific question. It says, a full-colored rabbit who had an albino parent. It's telling us about a rabbit and its parents. Seems like I might need to use a bit of a pedigree here to figure something out. Is bred to a Himalayan who also had an albino parent. So let me write that down over here in my pedigree type. Now, one thing about pedigrees is usually you shade in one phenotype and leave the other unshaded, but we can't really do that because we have 4 different phenotypes here: full color, Himalayan, albino, and chinchilla. So we need 4 different shadings. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually just write inside of their little figure what they are. And so I'm going to start off saying, so let me look at the question again. Maybe I should do this here and this here. Oh, I'm going to have to change my view here. Let me go to zoom 100%. Hey, that works. Okay, so over here and over here. So I'm going to show your work and the question side by side. Work and the question side by side. Sorry for this brief delay, but I got to do it so that everything is clear here. Okay, so in the question, it says, a full-color rabbit who had an albino parent. So I'm going to say that's the male. So I'm going to make it a square. I'm going to write the word full in here. So there's a full-colored rabbit, and it came from 2 parents, a daddy rabbit and a mommy rabbit. And it says one of these 2, and it really doesn't matter which, was albino. So the full-colored rabbit had an albino parent. All right. Now it says this full-colored rabbit is mated to a Himalayan who also had an albino parent. So I'm going to put him in here, Himalayan, and it also had one. This time let's make its mom was the albino parent. Dad. Now they didn't tell us anything about this one's dad or this one's mom, the other parent. It just said one of each of them's parent is albino. It does not say it's the same parent either. It suggests that they're different. So we got that. Now let's try to do a little bit of sleuthing here. Let's say, well, what did we learn about pedigrees? I think the thing we learned was the first thing you do is you take your most recessive one. Find any one that are at the bottom of this list with 2 recessive genes, and you can identify their full genotype because that's the only way to be the most recessive. So this albino parent had to be little c, little c. And this albino parent had to be little c, little c. Now, the other thing we learned about pedigrees is you can take the most dominant phenotype up here, all of your full color ones, have a big C. So we know this one is big C something, right? Now, we haven't done any where there's these in-between ones before, so we're going to just wait for a second and get to those. But let's consider this part of this pedigree here. This full color rabbit got a big C from some parent. it could not have gotten the big C from this parent, so we actually know that this parent has to be full colored. It has to have a big C to give this guy so this guy can be full colored. We don't know what this other gene is here, and it doesn't really matter. All we know is the big C from this parent went here. This other allele has to come from the other parent, and there's only one kind of allele this parent can give, and that's little c's. It doesn't matter if it's this one or this one. This is going to give a little c to all its offspring. So we actually know that this full color rabbit's full genotype is big C, little c. Pretty cool. In fact, that's the first question is, well, actually, it doesn't ask that. It should ask that. The first question should be, what's this guy's genotype? Big C, little c. No CHs or CCHs. Now, this one over here, we're going to consider this one now. Here's the first thing I want you to note. This one is Himalayan. What that means is it's going to be one of these two genotypes because none of these are Himalayan and this one's not. There's only two ways for this guy or this girl to be Himalayan. She's going to have as her most dominant gene a Himalayan gene. She can't have any gene more dominant than Himalayan, otherwise she would appear one of those other appearances. So her most dominant gene is CH. She's CH something. And just like this guy, this CH couldn't have come from this parent. It has to be coming from here. So we know this one has a CH gene. We don't know if it had a more dominant gene than CH, or it had a recessive gene, or two CCHs. We can't say much about this parent, except that it had a CH gene to give to this offspring. And the only reason we know it came from this one is because this one couldn't have given it a Himalayan gene. So it gets its CH gene from here. Its other gene must be coming from this parent. This is this one's genotype. The full genotype of that Himalayan offspring has to be CH little c. So now we know these two's genotype. The question we're asked is, what offspring could be expected from this cross? In other words, it wants to know what could happen down here. And of course, we know now that if you know the genotypes of two parents and they ask about the offspring, use a Punnett square. So let's put this in the Punnett square and have a look at what happens. The female here is CH from one parent and little c from the other parent. So when she makes her eggs, remember this is like a coin with the maternal genes on one side and the paternal gene on the other. You flip it, whichever one lands face up, heads or tails, will be one of these or the other. So what that means is that half of her gametes will have the Himalayan gene in it, here, and the other half of her gametes will have the albino gene like that. His genotype is big C, little c. So he can produce two kinds of sperm for this trait, for his fur color trait. He can produce ones that have the big C gene in them and ones that have the little c gene in them. And again, I hate it that it's C, but this question was already written over here. So I've got to, not over here, here, and they chose to use the letter C, which I hate. I would have used B for bunnies or R for rabbits, because then the capital and lowercase look a lot different. But this is a capital C here, and this is a lowercase c here. That's a full color gene that it has to make it full color. This is the albino gene that it got from its albino parent. They get separated during meiosis. So now we just do the Punnett square. If this sperm met this egg, that would produce an offspring that had a full color gene from dad and a Himalayan gene from mom. It would actually still look full color. So our genotype ratios and our phenotype ratios we're going to write down later. Let's keep going. If this sperm met with this egg, if this guy made a sperm like this and she made an egg like that, and they met, that would produce an offspring that has a big C gene from dad and a little c gene from mom. It would also be full color, but notice this is a unique genotype. Now, this will be the first time this has happened to us. This square and this square have always been the same when we've done this before. Now they are not. Now they are not going to be the same because this allele and this allele and this allele and this allele, they're not diagonally symmetric. So we actually have to think this through. If this sperm met this egg in this box, the most dominant allele that gets here is the Himalayan allele from the mom, and the dad's albino allele would meet it there. That would produce an organism with this genotype. Notice these are not the same genotype. That is one of the big differences you're going to get when you do Punnett squares with multiple alleles. You will not always get diagonals that match. This is a unique genotype. And then, of course, lastly, if this sperm met this egg, that would produce a little c, little c. So genotypically, we actually have a 1 big C, CH, 1 big C, little c, 1 CH, little c, and 1 little c, a 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 genotypic ratio. 4 unique genotypes produced from this cross. However, since both of these have a big C, you go back over here. This one's phenotype is full color, and this one's phenotype is also full color. Both of these, 2 out of the 4, are actually full color. They have different genotypes, but the same phenotype. This one, if we look it up over here, we see is Himalayan in appearance. So we have one that is Himalayan, and we have one that's albino. Albino, ALB. So our genotypic ratio is 1-to-1 to 1-to-1. Our phenotypic ratio is 1-to-2-to-1, where the 2 are actually full color. So basically, everything we did was the same as we would with a simple dominance, except we write out all the different alleles, which makes a very complicated GP chart. But taking the time to do the GP chart really helps us think, well, if I got an allele like this and an allele like that, what would it look like? And you have to take that and go C, CH, and CH, C, CH, and CH. That's a chinchilla, right? So doing this and this is good prep for actually solving the problem. And so when you go to your GP here, you're trying to figure out your genotypes and phenotypes that are produced from this Punnett square, this can be really, really helpful. So that's the first example of multiple alleles. Now, I'm going to work one more. Let's do number 4 here. It says 2 chinchilla rabbits. Oops, let me move that. 2 chinchilla rabbits are mated and produce both chinchilla and albino offspring. So it's a different problem, but it's still assuming you got rabbits with all these possible genes in them. And it says there are 2 chinchillas, a male chinchilla and a female chinchilla. 2 chinchilla rabbits are mated and produce some chinchilla offspring. Not much of a surprise because both parents are chinchilla. And that's a terrible circle there and a terrible eraser there. Some of their offspring are chinchilla, but they also can produce some albino offspring. What are the genotypes of the parents? That's what it asks over here. What are the genotypes of these? 2 chinchilla rabbits. 2 chinchilla rabbits are mated and produce in the next generation some chinchilla and some albino offspring, both chinchilla and albino offspring. What are their genotypes? So again, we go in and we go albino. That's easy. That's a little c right there, right? These guys are chinchilla. That means they're one of these 3 genotypes. But you'll notice all of them, their most dominant gene is the chinchilla gene. This is CCH something. This one is CCH something. This is CCH something. All of those, their most dominant allele is chinchilla allele. Now, let's know what their genotypes are. This offspring doesn't tell us much, but this offspring tells us everything we need to know. Because one of these little C's came from one parent, and the other little C came from the other parent. So these are both little c's here. They're both hybrid carrying the albino gene. Because to be able to produce an albino offspring, both of them have to give a little c to that baby. So both of them have to have a little c to give. Again, I want to emphasize, nobody is going to have more than two of these choices. All of these are diploid organisms. They separate their homologous pair during meiosis. So you're only going to have two all the way down. Don't get your superscripts mixed up with your subscripts because that can confuse you. Don't get your capital letters confused with your lowercase letters because that could confuse you. Anyway, the answer to number 4 is they are both CCH, little c. They're both this genotype for number 4. There are a lot of great problems on there. Several more rabbit problems. I really like this one. This one is like who da daddy problem, right? You guys have probably seen, what are those television shows? Maury Povich and, God, what's the other one? There's one that's really, Jerry Springer and stuff like that, where you have somebody claims that they're the daddy of this baby, and another one says, no, I'm the daddy of this baby, and the mom doesn't really know because she could have produced a baby with either one of them. So this is kind of the same thing. If you look at it real quick, it says a rabbit cage contains a Himalayan female and an albino and chinchilla male. So she could have produced babies with the albino male, or maybe she produced 8 babies with the chinchilla male. We don't really know. The female has 8 babies. 2 are Himalayan, 4 chinchilla, 2 are albino. Which of the male rabbits is the father? Who the daddy is what I call this. I love these problems. You can do this problem. Sit down, draw out 2 different pedigrees. One with a chinchilla male, and you don't know it's one of these genotypes, and one with an albino male, which you definitely know its genotype. The female in both of those will be Himalayan, but you don't know if she's this genotype or this genotype. So you set them both up, you kind of work through it logically, and figure out which of these 2 dads can actually produce all these offspring. It involves considering what the genotype of this Himalayan female might be. It's a fun problem. Please do it. Now, I know this is a long video already, but I have one more thing I want to show you, and that is you do not have to have multiple alleles in which the alleles are all dominant one after the other, and cascading dominance, as you might call that. You could have this. As it turns out, in human beings, type A blood, type A, which is a phenotype, type A blood, is due to an allele that is codominant. And I'm going to write it as IA. It is a codominant allele with the type B allele. The type B allele we will write is IB. So type A blood comes from this allele, and type B blood comes from this allele. But humans have multiple blood type alleles. There is one more that produces the type O blood. Type O blood is due to one that's recessive. Oops, I drew this wrong. It is recessive to both A and B, and we write it as a little I. So this is the code. A and B are codominant genes. O is a recessive gene. So when we write our GP chart, we have multiple alleles. Any individual can only have 2 from the 3 options. So maybe I believe that I am actually this genotype, IAIA, because I do have type A blood. I made an A on my blood test. Ha ha ha. But, it's possible that I'm actually IA little I, because type O allele is recessive to the type A allele. So this would also produce type A blood. I might have this one, or I might have that one. Now, I know some people who have type B blood. They could be purebred type B, like this, or they could be hybrid type B like this. Because the O allele is recessive to both of these, a person could have type B blood and be IB little I. Now, I do know that there are some people who are type AB blood. See, the thing is, A is co-dominant with B. They both appear, what makes blood B type A and what makes blood B type B can both appear in different places on the blood cells, which is the way codominant works. They just equally express in different parts. They take turns in different areas. And so to be type AB, what you need is you need to have an A allele making the A parts of you blood cell look like A blood. And then also other parts of the blood cells have the B indicator on them. IA, IB produces type AB blood. Now I could write this IB, IA, but I'm just going to do it in the same sequence here that I've got. You might realize there is one other blood type we haven't discussed. We haven't discussed type O blood. And the reason is because that is the most recessive of all blood types. Ironically, the most common blood type is the most recessive. Type O blood, because it is recessive to both of these, can only be produced if you're purebred for type O blood. My wife is actually type O blood. I have type A. All of our offspring are type A, which is why I think I'm purebred, and because then I could always give an IA, so her little eyes would always. Let's do a problem, okay? And in fact, these also make interesting who-to-daddy problems. Let's look, first off, oh, by the way, question number 1, this is the answer to question number 1. It says blood types in humans are due to multiple alleles. A and B alleles are codominant, and both are dominant to the allele for type O blood. In this course, we will use IA and IB for the two codominant alleles and little I for the recessive. List all possible genotypes. Well, that's here. And the associated phenotypes. That's here. So IA gives type A, little I gives type B, also type A. IB and IB little I both give you type B. IAIB gives you type AB, and little I gives you type O. Again, if you change the sequence of any of these, that would be the same. So a little I, IB is the same as IB, little I. Or IAIB is the same as IB, IA, right? We just choose to do them in this sequence if they're mismatched. All right. We do, by the way, still call this hybrid and this hybrid and this hybrid. There are 3 ways to be hybrid here, because there are multiple alleles. There are 3 ways to be purebred here. There are 6 genotypes possible in this particular problem. All right, so anyway, let's look at problem number 2. Mrs. Doe and Mrs. Rowe had babies in the same hospital on the same day. Uh-oh. Their names are a lot alike, and they both having babies at the same time. Mrs. Doe took home a little girl and named her Nancy. Mrs. Rowe received a boy and named him Harry. You're a wizard, Harry. However, Mrs. Rowe, I think, who took home Harry, was sure she had had a girl. And so she sued the hospital, saying, look, you guys sent me home with Harry, my boy, but I'm pretty sure my baby was a girl. I think I've got the wrong baby. Blood tests show that Mrs. Rowe was type AB and her husband was type O. Mr. and Mrs. Doe are both type B. Baby Nancy, the girl, is type A. Harry is type O. So let's briefly put together some pedigrees. Let's do the Rowe family and the Doe family. Now, Mr. Rowe, let me look in here. Mr. Rowe is type O. Mr. Rowe, type O. That rhymes. Mrs. Rowe is type AB. So she is an AB. Okay? Let's go over to the Doe family. They're both type B. Type B, type B. Now, you might understand why I do IA instead of just a capital A here. Because I need to be able to write down their blood types simply, and if I use A's and O's and B's, I get your phenotypes confused with our genotypes. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep our genotypes distinct from our phenotypes. So that's why I use the I's here, right? Does it make sense? So let's consider these guys. Type O, most recessive, she's a little I. Type AB, there's only one way to be type AB. He's IB. Now, the does are a little harder because there are two ways to be type B. IB little I and IB. So we don't know what that one is, and we don't know what that one is. Now, here's the tricky part. Nancy, here's Nancy down here. She is type A. That means she could be IA little I or IA. She's IA something. And down here is Harry. And Harry is type O. He is little I. So the question is, they sent Ro home with Harry. They did this. But let's consider, could Mom, could Mrs. Rowe ever have a type O baby? And the answer is no. All of her babies are going to get an A or a B allele. Her offspring are going to either be type A, type B, or maybe type AB if she fools around with somebody other than her husband. But if you think about this, if you put this in a Punnett square, okay, Mrs. Rowe is IAIB, and Mr. Rowe is little I. So assuming she isn't playing around with the mailman or something here, she is going to produce IAIB. Well, actually, even if she's playing around the mailman, she's going to make those eggs. But her husband's sperm will all be little I. In fact, we don't even have to do another line here. All of her offspring will either be, with this husband, will be type A, IA little I, or type B, IB little I. There is no way that these two parents made Harry. She can't have a type O offspring, even if she's fooling around with the mailman. It doesn't matter who she has sex with. She'll never produce a type O offspring. Harry is definitely not her child. On the other hand, let's consider the does. Well, we don't know what these alleles are here. Wait, Nancy's type A? Yeah. We don't know what these alleles are here. But we do know he's type B. That means this can't be an IA, because if it were, he'd be type AB. So he cannot give a type A allele to any of his offspring. And by the same logic, she can't either. So there is no way that these two parents produce Nancy. It is possible that these two parents could produce a type A offspring. It's right there. And it is possible if both of the does are hybrid type B, IB little I, IB little I, they could produce Harry. So the result is that it looks like the hospital screwed up, that the Rows should have Nancy in their house and the Does should have Harry in their house, because Harry cannot be the offspring of the Rows, and it can't be the offspring of Mrs. Rowe no matter what. And it is conceivable that the Does could be the parents of Harry, but not Nancy. There's no way they could. Now, it is true that if Miss Doe had produced an offspring with somebody who was type A, she could produce. So like if Miss Doe was fooling around with me, maybe we could make Nancy. But her and her husband are never going to produce Nancy because neither of them have an A allele in them. All right, so interesting, fun stuff. That is multiple alleles, where you have multiple alleles, which produces a variety of genotypes, but any individual will only have two of the options that are there, and then you just work them based on the individual. That's all I've got for you in this video. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope the sound came out well here. As always, you could play it faster or slower, rewatch it, whatever you need. For your project, for the EOS, let me talk about that briefly, actually. For your end of semester project, you're going to need to do at least one multiple allele problem. So one popular one that people do is eye color. Now, real eye color is much more complicated in humans, but some people pretend like there's a big B allele for brown eyes and it's dominant to everything. There's a little b superscript G, BG, that produces green eyes. It is, of course, recessive to the brown eyes, but it's dominant to the little b gene for blue eyes. So big B, BG, little b, brown, green, blue. The only way to be blue-eyed is little b. Two ways to be green-eyed, purebred green or green with a blue-eyed gene that's recessive. Three ways to be brown-eyed, purebred brown, big B, brown carrying a green gene, big B, little bg, and brown carrying a blue-eyed gene, big B, little b. You could do problems like that. And then you could say, oh, my male is big B, little b, and my female has green eyes. She's little bg, little b. What are the chances they could produce a blue-eyed offspring? And you do the Punnett square and you discover it's 1 out of 4 of their offspring on average. And that would be the way you would solve the problem. You would state the problem and solve the problem in your end of semester example. Best of luck. If you have questions, do a My Compass message to me, and I will get a notification on my phone, and then I can respond via My Compass and agree on a time for us to meet in the Google Meet for the class, and I can give you extra help. Thanks. Have a great day.